soldier walks into a bar. "How's it going?" the bartender says. To which the Spartan soldier replies, "I can't complain." The commander of a troop of Spartan soldiers holds a training session in the morning. There's a young soldier that he sees later that day. "I didn't see you at camouflage training earlier this morning," he says. "Thank you very much, sir," the soldier replies. All right, so soldier themed jokes, military jokes. Why am I making this? Obviously, because we're going to be talking about, after we do oligarchy in Sparta, we're going to be talking about Spartan culture, which is based on the military. So in the last video, I was talking about how Sparta's government worked, how they had two kings at the head, and then they had a council of elders. They also had an assembly. So I didn't finish talking about the assembly, and I'm going to pick that up now. So remember, the assembly is all free adult males in the Spartan city-state. And unlike the Athenian assembly, which had somewhere between 40 and 50,000 members, the Spartan assembly only had 9,000 members. And this is because Sparta restricted who could be a free adult male citizen. Right? In the entire city-state, only 9,000 men were free adult male citizens. Likewise, unlike Athens' assembly, Sparta's assembly was much more limited in its power. Right? It did have the power to create laws, but it could only make laws if the council of elders approved of these laws. Now, the Spartan assembly did have one significant power, and this was the power to elect ephors. So ephors are a council of 5 officials who make sure that the council of elders and the kings are following the law, right? And ephors were very, very powerful. So if a member of the council of elders or even a king broke the law, the ephors, if they wanted to, could remove that person from their position. Right? Ephors also were in charge of education. They were in charge of most of the military decisions. And they also had the power to overrule the decisions made by the Council of Elders. So the ephors were a group of 5 men who were very, very powerful, and their job was basically to limit the kings, limit the Council of Elders, run the education system, and run the military system. Right? Remember, ephors were chosen by the assembly. So this was the main source of power that the assembly had. All right. A big difference, again, between Athens and Sparta is in Athens, you have much greater citizen participation in government. In Sparta, they have a culture that does not encourage citizen participation in government. Instead, they encourage people to basically just shut up and obey, right? To fit into their system, don't cause any trouble, just obey what you're told, right? Now, I do want to make a quick note about the power of the ephors to depose kings. So they did have the power to get rid of kings, but sometimes they failed to do this. So kings would be able to use their political power to basically stop the ephors from removing him. Also, sometimes because Sparta had 2 different kings, when the ephors would remove one king, another king would take his place, and that the old king and the new king would not get along, right? And this could lead to conflicts among Sparta's leadership. So yeah, these 5 ephors are really powerful, really important. All right, so just like all the other city-states we've learned about, Sparta has a really big problem with overpopulation. Meaning they don't have enough resources to support their population. So hunger is a really big problem in Sparta. So where city-states like Athens turn to colonization and trade and commerce in order to support their growing population, Sparta, of course, has to rely on conquest. Right? So this is what Sparta did to make sure that they had enough resources to feed their population. If Sparta conquered a region, the Spartans would take over the new farmland and they would use it to grow more food for themselves. And oftentimes, what the Spartans would do is they would make the conquered people Helots, also called Helots. Right? Helots are slaves who work the farmland for the Spartans. Right? So they're basically mistreated captives. That's how you can think of Helots. So Spartans would go, they'd conquer new territory, and rather than taking you prisoner, they would make you a slave. Right? Now, what's interesting about the Helots is they were not owned by slave owners. Instead, they were owned by the entire city-state of Sparta. So Sparta owned thousands and thousands of Helots all at one time, and these Helots were obligated to farm their farmland, just like they always had before they were conquered. But Sparta made sure that they did not keep the food they grew. In fact, Helots were only allowed to keep half of the food they grew. The rest belonged to the Spartans. Helots did not have any legal rights at all. Right? So they were able to produce food, but were only allowed to keep just barely enough to survive, and that's it. Obviously, this is going to lead to problems. So the Helots don't like this. The Helots outnumbered Spartans by about 10-1. Sparta went out and conquered a lot of surrounding territories and turned all those people into Helots. And so, the Helots outnumbered Sparta about 10-1. And so the Helots often revolted against the Spartans. In order to control the Helots, the Spartans had to crush their revolts with violence. And in order to do this, they had to turn Sparta into a military state, right? So a military state is a type of government or state organized for the purpose of waging war. Right? So Sparta was motivated to become a military state in order to control the Helots, in order to make sure they had enough food and resources to feed their people. Now, originally, most of the Helots were from a region of Greece called Messenia, which is the southwest corner of the Greek peninsula. Right? So this is Messenia right here. So Sparta traveled from like the center of the Greek peninsula over to Messenia. They conquered this territory. They got all the farmland, but rather than taking the people there captive or executing them, they said, all right, you're going to continue to work on all this farmland, but we're going to come every year and every harvest, and we're going to take half of it away. Right? And then they started doing this to other regions as well. So this is how the Helots outnumbered the Spartans 10-1. Right? And in order to be able to control all of these people, they had to become a military state. So what did the military state entail? Number one, every year the ephors would declare war on the Helots. Now the reason they did this was not only to control the Helots, but also to make it clear that it was legal to kill a Helot for any reason. So any Spartan is allowed to kill any Helot for any reason. This makes it easy for the Spartans to control the Helots, because the Helots are always going to be in fear for their life. The Spartans also had a secret police who were spying on the Helots and watched over them. And these secret police could arrest or kill Helots for any reason. The Spartans also forced the Helots to wear hats that were made out of dog skin. So one way you would know if a person was a Helot or not is if they were wearing a hat made out of a dog's skin. Right? And then, of course, every time the Helots revolted or protested or resisted, they were punished, often with death. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'll stop there. I'll make one more video on Sparta on Monday.